Good evening, morning, afternoon, whenever you're watching this. I kind of did this at the spur of the moment. JR sent a good hello. Hope everybody's well. Whoever is going to watch this, whenever they watch it, whatever time, whatever day, that's great. But I wanted to add something to. So I've done a couple of videos recently about Alpine. Let me before I get to that, because it's gonna be really. Hopefully, this will be like 10 minutes or less. Um, Before I get into this, obviously this is not legal advice, just entertainment for entertainment purposes, if it is entertaining, and hopefully will be informative in some respect. And I'm just kind of like it. Sometimes I'm just going to do spur of the moment live streams, and then I will post it. And anybody wants to watch it later, that's great. But what JR sent me something today. My JR sent me something today about Alpine, and since I've done JR and I've done a bunch of videos and live streams about Alpine, and I myself have done a bunch about the recent status of Alpine. I think I did 2 videos last week, and he sent me something today about a decision regarding at least an interim decision from the Supreme Court. So to bring everybody up to speed as briefly as I can, there's a Alpine petitioned the Supreme Court to intervene to block FINRA from going forward with their expedited expulsion. The Court of Appeals in DC had agreed that there should be some review by the SEC, but had allowed the expulsion hearing to go forward. Alpine wasn't satisfied with this. They filed a petition with the Supreme Court about a month ago asking that the entire FINRA status be thrown out, and obviously no proceedings go forward. So what JR forwarded me today was some information about a ruling that the Supreme Court made about the Alpine case. And it happened apparently sometime yesterday after I did my video. But I didn't see it till today. And then I read a few articles, and that's why I decided to do a video. So and before I get into that, since we're talking about the Supreme Court, picking a Supreme Court justice is like crossing a river. It always comes down to Roe versus Wade. And last but not least, the Supreme Court is just a court with extra sour cream and tomatoes. That's what it comes down to. Anyway, so the petition to the Supreme Court. With the petition, they also requested a stay that FINRA wouldn't be allowed to go forward with the expulsion hearing that they had already commenced. The court, and it was directed, I don't know who it was directed to, but this issue was decided by Chief Justice Roberts, and his decision was to deny the stay. And basically that there was no immediate risk of harm because they hadn't been expelled. And kind of what my videos had said was, I took it way beyond this. I thought factually they're not going to take this case because they're scumbags and they have a history of all kinds of misconduct. But beyond that, they hadn't reached the point where they had been expelled, and so there was no risk. And the ruling by the Supreme Court justice not ordering the stay at least suggests that some members of the court may be of the opinion that there's no harm from which the Supreme Court would take the case until they actually get expelled. And so that suggests that it's not immediate. So there was a bunch of briefs that were filed. I just kind of did a very cursory review of the briefs on the Supreme Court website a few minutes ago. So there was a brief filed by Alpine. And by the way, I don't know how Alpine affords to pay for all these legal fees. These are long briefs with multiple counsels with a small little company. So I ask again, who's paying this? And the issue, again, the issue is backwards. The issue is not that FINRA and the SEC have exercised too much power with regard to Alpine. The issue is why they haven't exercised appropriate power against Alpine, who, as I've recited multiple times, 40 violations that they were found to either admitted to or found guilty of, involving the SEC, FINRA, etc., since their inception, involving millions of dollars of misappropriations, not filing suspicious activity reports, which may have been involving terrorism. They tried to promote as their representative a convicted sex offender. That's in the background. But notwithstanding that, they made the petition to the Supreme Court and they asked for the stay. Supreme Court doesn't seem to be moved by their current status. And I think that was argued in the brief. But one thing that kind of troubled me, just to be honest, and I was saying who filed briefs. So who filed briefs was Alpine's counsel, and that's why I was blathering about how they affording all this, who's paying for it. Really, this is millions and millions of dollars in legal fees for a shit-ass company doing very little business, in my opinion. Can't be making a lot of money, so I don't know who's paying these millions and millions of dollars of legal fees, but that would be the first place I'd go. And of course, I've asked, specifically asked, have tweeted, X'd, Doge, SEC to investigate why, contrary to what this case says, why the SEC and FINRA didn't shut these guys down long ago. But what troubled me in the briefs, so the FINRA filed a brief, the Alpine filed 2 briefs, and the government filed a brief. Brief was filed, I think, on March 7th. So this is during the current administration. And the thing that troubled me, we've had all had discussions about the inadequacies of the regulatory system. And again, this Alpine is the perfect MMTLP, Alpine, 2 perfect examples of the regulatory system gone bad, not doing their job. Why? I don't know. Payoffs, bribes, I don't know. Incompetence, intentional neglect, I don't know. But something's going on and something has to be investigated, and Doge is in the perfect position. However, one of the statements made by the current administration in support of FINRA's position, and that should already get you somewhat concerned, said that the reason why the stay shouldn't be issued because it would frustrate the political branches and the public's goal of encouraging self-regulation of the securities industry. What kind of bullshit is that? I mean, we've seen multiple times. So they are opposing the stay, the government, the current administration, and hopefully that will change. But this is the current administration. This brief is filed in March. Says they don't want to stay because they want to encourage self-regulation. I think we've seen enough of self-regulation, and it doesn't work. And I was really disturbed by the government taking that position. And I clearly do not support that position. And notwithstanding the fact that they're anti-Alpine, I obviously believe this regulatory system sucks, doesn't protect retail investors or anything along the lines. And I think that all of us, and I certainly will, reach out to Doge, the administration, to create a proper record that this self-regulatory system certainly does not work and hasn't worked till today. And it's nonsense. And their opposition based on that is nonsense. Even if they hate Alpine also. So I got all worked up over that. So Supreme Court denied the stay. Could they grant the cert? In other words, the request and hear the case? Yes. But it wouldn't make sense to me if they denied the stay because they haven't been expelled yet, and they would take the case before they got expelled. Doesn't make sense to me. I don't think they're going to take the case, at least in this term. And there is another case, and it was kind of referenced in this, and I think the oral arguments will either be the end of March or April, and we'll keep an eye on it, me and JR. It's a case involving the SEC, and one of the arguments that Alpine makes in their petition is the same argument. We've talked about this, the non-delegation doctrine, that if Congress delegates authority, they have to keep track of what's going on. They can't just let it go. And it's a case involving the FCC and $9 billion grant that was to be used for, I think, broadband and telephone services in rural areas. And the FCC basically had unilateral authority to kind of exercise their judgment. And there's a case in the Supreme Court under that non-delegation doctrine, which Alpine has raised, that will be decided during this term. And I wouldn't be surprised if the court found that the delegation of $9 billion without proper supervision may have been a violation of non-delegation doctrine, and the FCC, it might be a violation or improper for the FCC. What should be noted, however, is the FCC, Federal Communications Commission, is actually a regulatory body, and FINRA is not. FINRA is an SRO. So you would think that FINRA would have to be up to a higher standard, not a lower standard, since it's not government, but it's acting as, in effect, as government and with immunity. But anyway, that case will be important because that might decide an issue that might be decided in Alpine. It also is an issue that might affect all regulatory agencies because there may be other grants of authority without supervision that might be overturned also. And it might involve the SEC, it might involve SROs, we don't know yet. But anyway, that case was referenced, and I think that will be the next big case that is decided with regard to regulatory authority. I'm hoping another case comes, and I've said this multiple times, I hope another case comes before Alpine actually gets to the point where a court would actually consider it and involves the same FINRA issues, and that Alpine's expelled by then and done, and then FINRA gets kicked out, or immunity stripped, or arbitration is vacated, or anything like that. So quick summary. Supreme Court denied the stay. That suggests to me that they'll probably deny the request to have their case heard, at least at this time. And anybody who suggests to the contrary could be correct. But the way I see it, I don't see it at this point in time that Alpine is going to be getting relief from the Supreme Court at any time soon. And that doesn't stop FINRA and the SEC from being managed differently and having different restrictions put on them, but I just don't see it through Alpine. And of course, I'm biased. I despise Alpine and what they have done and what they stand for. But I think procedurally, it's just a bad case. And I think, because it would be me, if anybody else, that if this case makes it to the Supreme Court, and perhaps it will, and there are briefs filed, I will be filing a brief with the U.S. Supreme Court, and I'm going to set forth all the garbage that these guys have engaged in. I guess there's a record, it's a public record, that these guys have engaged in and put the burden on the Supreme Court to say, notwithstanding that these guys tried to hire a child molester and things like that, or other events. And again, I read from a document. I actually have a document here. If you recall, I read from a October 3rd, 2022 FINRA document in which they were deciding whether the person that Alpine had tried to get to be the representative years before, who was a convicted sex offender. Anyway, I read from there, and a lot of the stuff that I read from comes right out of this document. And as far as I know, there was no appeal of this, so this is what it is. And again, if anybody wants to look for it, it's available publicly, a FINRA letter dated October 3rd, 2022, SD, it's regarding SD-2238. So the bottom line is, if this case ever got to the Supreme Court, I would just read through all the garbage, and then I'd throw on top the convicted sex offender, and I'd like to see the Supreme Court rule in favor of those scumbags at that point in time. Maybe, we shall see. I would be skeptical. So I would be surprised if after reviewing the history that the Supreme Court ever touches Alpine, but I don't know, because you never know. And again, some other case might come before it. Anyway, I've babbled longer than I thought, but I wanted to bring you up to speed just so you know that the Supreme Court has already kind of like knocked them down once, which is good for me, the way I see it, and good for all of us, because these guys don't deserve any kind of consideration. Certainly, they don't deserve any kind of equity, and that's one of the arguments. Anyway, so that's it for tonight. Other than and I don't know the details. In the GTII situation, the deposition of Justine Reichman did go forward. It's under some type of protective order confidentiality agreement. It actually proceeded. There was no Fifth Amendment taken. There was some concern and thought that either Justine Reichman or David Reichman might take the Fifth Amendment in their deposition, because they'd be concerned about potential criminal liability. And I don't know if that will happen with David Reichman. Apparently, Justine Reichman, she did not take the Fifth. I don't know what she testified to, but my impression, I wasn't there. My impression is she would not have known a lot of stuff and probably pushed it aside. And that's my guess. And I'm pretty good at guessing, so that's my guess, especially if she appeared. And it'll be interesting to me to see if David Reichman actually appears for his deposition, if he appears with his criminal counsel, and if he actually testifies. And I would strongly encourage the receivers counsel to move forward with David Reichman's deposition immediately, to put the burden on them to decide if they're going to testify under penalty of perjury or not. And if they refuse, and if somebody takes the Fifth, I guess in Nevada, then they basically lose. That's kind of what happens. They lose the civil case. I'm going to read one. I see a question. So I'm reading the question as I posted it. Yeah, I don't know. I don't. Obviously, they haven't done anything. The SEC and FINRA have been around for this. My point was Alpine's been around for 45 years. SEC and FINRA have had multiple opportunities to shut them down. They have not. The reason they haven't shut them down, I have no idea. I would suspect it's not a good reason. That it's either some the best case scenario, incompetence. Best case scenario. Worst case scenario, bribery, felonious misconduct. Again, what concerned me is that the waiting, like the last straw was the sex offender, the admitted sex offender. I really don't know, especially the guy who was working with regulators for Alpine. I don't know what I don't know what's going on there, and nobody's really clarified it. Nobody appealed the denial of that. So I don't know why the SEC and FINRA have not acted. This is the most egregious, factual setting. The Alpine record speaks for itself. It's not contested. So you have to wonder why they haven't acted. It makes me wonder. I don't think there's any good reason, no good reason. But it did concern me, again, the federal government's current position that they were okay with self-regulatory. I'm not okay with that, and none of you should be okay with that either, because we've all seen what that leads to, and that's the exact question. FINRA's self-regulatory. How good has that been? Not very good at all. How good has the SEC's monitoring of FINRA been? Not very good at all. And how good is the Congress's monitoring of the SEC and FINRA? I think it's been absent without leave. Anyway, so that's it. When I know a little more about the depositions, I'll let you know and bring you up to speed. I know there's still negotiations going on between AIversity and the receiver, because they're trying to get a deal finalized. There's no deal finalized at this point in time, but I know it's being worked upon. Trying to think anything else that I can think of. No, I think that's it for this one. I hope it was informative. I hope you loved the jokes. Please, if you agree with me, if you don't agree with me, then that's fine too. But if you agree with me, press the point. Post on X. Contact your Congress people. Contact Doge. Indicate that self-regulation of the securities industries does not work. And we've been the guinea pigs for that. But you got to make yourselves known, and in numbers. So please reach out. If you don't agree, then that's fine. Then don't reach out, or reach out and say something else. But if you agree with me that the self-regulatory system regarding securities does not work for retail, contrary to what the federal government said in their March 7th brief in the Alpine case, let your words be heard. Really, let your voices be heard. Anyway, hope everybody has a great night wherever you are. Be well, take care, and we will be doing JR. JR was not available. That's why he's not here. I joked about him being pissed off at yesterday, but he's not really. We're fine. But JR and I will be back soon to do another live stream. Hope everybody's well. Take care. Have a great Saturday night or Sunday morning, and we shall see you soon.